Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode 25 of Behind the Whiskers, the podcast where we discuss all sorts of strange and unusual things and usually run way off the rails. My name is Mitchell Fink, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Holly Clinton.
And today we have a special guest, Mr. Kerry Magnus, with us.
Hi there, guys. Happy to be on the podcast.
Thanks for being here with us.
Indeed. How's it going, Kerry? How have you been?
Oh, it's been a lot of ups and downs lately. I'm excited to say that I am now officially retired.
Congratulations.
My workplace decided to downsize, and I was one of the downsized. But on the upside, I get a generous package that allows me to do what I would rather be doing, probably what most of us would rather be doing than working, which is pursuing my interests, getting back into my circus training a little more seriously, and hopefully lining up some performance gigs.
I believe Mitch has been searching for a generous package as well, but that's a different story.
I'm not acknowledging that response. So, anyway, so Kerry, for context of those who don't know him, is a friend that we encountered first at the Viking Experience Festival and doing what he does best, which is performing circus arts, which then gives everybody else in the room the cue as to why are we bringing this guest on, although that's not been a firm rule. There have been some ridiculously un-circus related artists, but we're tickled to have you with us today.
Indeed.
Yep, I'm proud to be one half of the best Viking-themed circus acrobatic act in the world, the Nimble Norseman. And I have seen at least one other, maybe second best, Viking-themed circus acrobatic act. So it's no longer just us. We don't win by default anymore. Now we win because I say we're better than those other folks.
Well, I think that deciding something is the first step to solving any problem, right? So you have been in and around the world of circus since...
Oh, goodness. 1998 is when I first started studying circus arts. I was at a New York university, and I was actually studying to be a biologist or computer scientist. I hadn't made up my mind. When I was looking through the course catalog, I saw that there was a circus arts class available to any student in the university. And I thought, this just sounds like the best value I could possibly get for my parents' money. And just had an amazing time. The teacher was this long-standing, very illustrious figure in the circus world, Hovey Burgess, who's been the head teacher at the Ringling Brothers Clown Academy. He's been the president of the International Jugglers Association. His extended family and his circus students have started things as diverse as the San Francisco Circus School or the Seven Fingers of the Hand performing troupe.
It's a very prestigious person.
Yeah, and he looks like Santa Claus, big, jolly fellow, white beard, and he just loves the circus arts, and he kind of infected me.
I mean, sometimes it just takes one person to spread the love for something so unique. I mean, I can't say that I was ever entirely this interested in sideshow stuff until Mitch was like, hey, you want to join the sideshow? It's like, well, it does allow me to tell people that I ran away to join the sideshow, which gets an ultimately great reaction from everybody. So, yeah.
And I mean, it seems like you ran a far way, or at least you ended up a long way from home.
Definitely.
I think that there's a really strange delineation between circus and sideshow that I've actually only recently seen coalesce at one place, and that is actually the World Carnival Museum that we talked about on the air, whatever, 3-4
The last two episodes.
At some point in front of this microphone. They just held a no-kidding circus in a tent with elephants as a fundraiser, where their local kids in town came and performed. One of their kids was like 12 years old juggling fire. It was pretty cool. But that weird line, so in full admittance, sideshow is kind of considered to be the slightly scarier, sort of maybe inbred cousin of circus, right? Like it's often its weird little corner.
It's the sleazy uncle of circus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally the side show, the show on the side. So that means that there is some snobbery because the circus is in the main tent. They're the real show. And the sideshow is on the side. Although, of course, then that gets to be enough of its own independent art form that the Coney Island sideshow doesn't, of course, have a main tent, right? The
They're standalone.
Is the main
the whole show.
attraction. So it's definitely something that there's still sideshow acts and circus acts. So I think you still see people won't usually eat glass, stick skewers through their body. Even sword swallowing, I think that's right on the border, right? Like, you might see a sword swallower in a quote-unquote main stage circus act, but if you see them in the sideshow, they'll usually present it differently. Like, that'll be the cleaner presentation in the circus and the sleazier presentation in the sideshow.
I think that the two things have been kind of conflated now in the public's mind and imagination now that we've moved past the classic circus. I don't actually know the last time. I believe Ringling was the last circus that still performed broadly in a tent, though there are some today, but to the point that they had an actual midway connected with the rest of their circus, and they had a functioning sideshow. And so now those two things I find are typically kind of independent concepts, but then in variety performances hired out by parties and venues, they're just looking for any human that is doing a weird, unique, interesting thing. And so now we've all been kind of, for the best, lumped together for survival, which kind of leads me to a big question that I think would be interesting to hear your answer as someone who's had a long career in this, is how do you see in today's world circus and sideshow and other human body performing arts, their reception and survival in a world where a lot of us are struggling to make money?
No, I think it's largely a question of where you're at. So the pandemic was hard for performers of all kinds across the board. And I think we've seen circus bounce back fastest in the places where circus arts are seen as a dramatic art. And that,
dramatic art meaning in the same way that theater or Shakespeare or anything like that is revered.
Exactly. And in Europe, for example, you can be a circus artist and get art grants, and schools can be supported and accredited by the state in a way that means there is the ability for people to continue practicing, honing their craft, developing performances, even when they're not being paid by doing those performances. They have the time, the breathing room to really put together a show. I think that that's something that is the reason why we see the stronger and the more enduring circus tradition in Europe, is because they're not just dependent on the ability to perform for money. They can take the time to build their skills, and they have the place, the opportunity, and the teachers so that they can build very high-level skills and then bring them to an audience.
I wonder, do you think that we're ever going to see that? And well, actually, it's kind of two questions then. So, American circus artists don't necessarily have the support or respect that they normally would get in a European country.
Yep.
But ironically, if I look at a lot of modern European circuses, and Pender's Circus is one of my favorites. It's a really old circus in England that's still touring, and I believe it's like 5th or 6th generation. Their ringmaster is like 20-something years old, and he is climbing around tents, putting them up with his crew, all the traditional romantic ideas you have about a circus. His primary act is that of cowboy art tricks, dressed as an American cowboy.
Oh yeah. No.
Because America sort of created, I think, this foundational image in its head of the world zeitgeist about circus is this very American-looking thing. Why is that? Compared, if the arts are so revered there, but not here, and yet.
Well, it's a question of what is the circus, and I think that what we can see is you're very right that the idea of the modern circus, even though it does start in Europe, it reaches its most evolved form in America, the form that we stick in people's mind, the three-ring circus. And the circus itself, like, why does the circus have a ring? And what is the circus ring? The circus ring is the size of a circle that is the smallest circle you can have where a horse can reach a gallop. So circuses originate...
In one pass around the circle.
Yep, or
it can reach a galloping speed.
It can gallop and curve at that radius.
Ah.
So circuses have been equestrian and equestrian based before they've been purely human based.
Which is where we get the modern day idea of a ringmaster from, with the tall riding boots and
Yep.
the crop and all of that stuff, is because their job was to take charge of the animals in the circus.
Exactly. And so, of course, that animal based, if you think of, like, then who is the romantic figure on a horse changes from a cavalry officer into a cowboy. And there's still this romantic notion of cowboys and cowboy circus acts in Europe. We have it here too, though. It's just the only place you'll see those acts in America is at a rodeo.
Which is a tremendously odd place to find circus, but was one of the first places I ran into it. The first place I took my first car was there was a rodeo, it was a live event, and I wanted to go see it, and some of the stuff they did in that was absolutely mind-blowing and incredibly dangerous.
Yep. And in fact, now it's only in the rodeo that you'll see a lot of the things that used to be the circus equestrian acts. Because we don't have, we still have the notion of a three-ring circus or a circus ring, but when's the last time you saw an equestrian act in a circus?
A long time ago.
The year 2000, I think, is the last time I saw a...
Mom took me to Ringling
Equestrian.
in 2007. Would have been when I had seen that, and that was at a young enough age that I don't think I really perceived the grandiosity of the now working back end for Broadway shows and doing my own shows, the complicated maneuvering that has to take place logistically to include giant live animals that can eat your face.
Yep.
Is the tent really becomes a non-issue in the grand list of problems you have to solve. Oh, it's leaking in the corner? Okay, well, we have to feed these animals before they try to eat one of us. Is a much scarier problem. It's kind of interesting. The romantic cowboy notion we see in art a lot too, even reflected in Disney parks, where, for instance, Europe doesn't have a great relationship with horror in the same way Americans are fascinated by it because they grew up with it. There's ghosts around every corner. Every building is haunted. There are monsters everywhere. Do not go into the moors at night. There will be werewolves. These are just facts they understand to be true.
Yep.
Whereas in America, we're like, oh, let's go try to find it. No. But when Disney did their version of the Haunted Mansion at their park in Paris, they were stuck with a weird conundrum, which is that stuff does not fascinate European people at all.
Yep.
So they made it Western themed to try to drag that out, and it worked. People were like, oh, a Wild West ghost story. Because I guess in the same way that we worship the Victorian era as this far-flung romantic concept, what was happening in America at that time was the Wild Wild West.
Yep.
And they were doing the same idolizing from across the pond, which is interesting that it translates forward into something as prominent there as circus arts. It's kind of wild.
It's the concept of appreciating what you have versus what you can see. You are going to have less appreciation for something that you're experiencing every single day versus getting to experience something from another culture, another time, another place. It's just going to have a lot more of an effect, of an impact on your experience.
Yep. I guess ironically those early shows too that we see, and by early I mean pre-now, in America, a lot of the advertising and copy I saw for those was ironically this same thing, but in reverse, which is this far-flung family from Asia, that may be all white American people, doing some crazy acrobatic act, or look at these indigenous folks from Africa doing this amazing thing when they may have been born and raised in America and were just performers, but by putting that foreign label or flavor upon the act, not so dissimilar to the Viking thing that you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's that idea of the circus being the exotic. So you see at the circus what you don't see in everyday life. The circus is special and magical and different. And Cirque du Soleil will take that concept farther and make it literally magical, make it surreal, bring it outside the confines of reality.
Dreamscapey.
Yeah, it's not just a tiger. Now there are mythical beasts and monsters, and it's extending kind of that idea, though, of the circus as the fantastic.
And it's interesting to the point of shows in circus and human art presentation being phenomenal or magical, is that's a quality that we see desired more and more in all sorts of modern performances or entertainment, because it's allowing people to escape from the reality. And so maybe that overlap alone may be enough to help preserve some of these things that people aren't supported to be able to learn conventionally with a proper university behind it here.
Yeah, I think there is a good future for live performance, for art in America as well, because we're seeing that now the virtual, the screen-based, the artificially generated entertainment is becoming so prevalent that it's becoming boring. It's becoming overwhelming in its volume. And that seeing something that's actually human is thereby gaining more value. Knowing that it is valuable, a circus act is valuable because a human is performing it. Because there's nothing special about the ability to balance something or juggle something. We have machines that can do these tasks, but a machine doing that task lacks novelty. It lacks
emotion.
Yeah, any empathy we would have for the performer, where we know what they have done to gain those skills, and they can also demonstrate those skills with a character, with a story. And then we can empathize with the difficulty, we can respect the ability, and we can enjoy the story. So I think circus is ready for a strong comeback in America as a commercial venture, right? Like it's definitely strong as a personal venture. Having the circus as circus training, as your sport or your fitness hobby, is another venue.
Yeah.
So I think that's two ways that circus can continue to grow as we go forward.
I'm excited to see a full turnaround of not just old forgotten skills like circus arts and whatnot, but forgotten trades as well, like smithing and stuff is becoming big again. I saw recently, I think it was Harvard put out an announcement or something that if you take fencing, skeet shooting, and something else, you can receive a certificate of piracy, a diploma of piracy. And I was like, that is amazing. I've never wanted to go back to school more than just to get a certificate of piracy.
Get an actual university to sign off on your efficacy as a pirate.
I just thought that was rum, sodomy, and the lash.
Right. It was a classic way to get there. I mean, I think you could also consider that for less than a university education, you can go to your neighbor's dock and steal their boat, thereby engaging literally in the oldest known formally recognizable crime, which is piracy. Man builds raft, neighbor steals raft, neighbor is a pirate. But I think that there's some hope for some old traits. One of the things that we noticed most about the Carnival World Museum was the simplicity of some of the environments, but also the warmth and character of those environments that is, again, held in that weird zeitgeist file of things that we as American people just understand. We know what a ringmaster looks like. We know that there should be a red, white, striped tent. Some of these things are hyperbole or ridiculous because they didn't always look at that.
Oh, yes.
They didn't always look that way. A lot of tents were white. But we've got these ideas and notions about how things should be in these beautiful hand-painted canvases, advertising things. all of that sort of tomfoolery, the idea of a ring filled with sawdust, those kinds of things that people, or even that one's a little bit weird, but I had an actor once look at me, a haunted house actor who had some professional acting training, zero circus experience, knew nothing about it. And he was to play a sort of, in the modern slang, a carnival barker character for us. And he started doing some digging, and he said, hey, is there a world where you could put sawdust everywhere I was supposed to perform? Because that was an idea in his mind. He had no idea why there would have been sawdust.
It's the horses, man. It's the
Right,
horses.
back to the horses.
Yep.
What you had mentioned at some point, either in this podcast or to us before the podcast, that you had a circus arts school.
Yep. So in, about 2016, I decided to quit my job as a software engineer and open a circus school, because this has been, like I say, something I'd started in college and I'd kept up as a hobby. And what I noticed in our local area was that we didn't have a circus school.
That local area being the Triangle,
Yep.
North Carolina,
North
Durham.
Carolina, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham Triangle. And we did have some aerial studios, often with like an aerial yoga studio where people would learn like aerial fabric or aerial sling, but nothing that was a circus, meaning a learning performing arts with the intention to perform, where you could learn those skills.
These other schools were in reference to your comment about people using it for their own,
Yeah,
like exercise or something like that, popular, but a focus on performance non-existent.
Exactly. And I trained at circus schools in New York, like the now defunct Circus Warehouse or the Muse, that were high-level circus schools training you to perform in a variety of disciplines. Because to really become a competent circus performer, you need multiple skills in multiple disciplines. In a circus troupe, everyone has to wear more than one hat. Everyone needs to be able to learn choreography. Everyone needs basic acrobatics. Everyone needs to be able to juggle 3 balls. These are just basic skills. Like, most people don't realize that in a circus school, the juggler has to learn the splits, and the acrobat has to learn to juggle. So that in a performance, when you're in the ensemble, you can be useful in a variety of scenes or scenarios.
Without locking your choreographer into hell, because now
Right.
they're like, only these 3 people can do this, but I really need 5.
Exactly. But so that means that I wanted to make that possible here. And honestly, as a business decision, it was, I definitely bit off more than I could chew. I started too big, but I just had that notion of I want someone to be able to learn to do a handstand, to do the trapeze, to juggle, to do any circus skill that I can provide in a large warehouse space. And to encourage people that, if they come in thinking, I just want to learn to juggle, I'll encourage them to get up in the air. If they're in the air, I'll encourage them to learn to tumble or walk on their hands. I think that that's really what the circus is about, is learning the skills, but the other part of the circus is learning to use those skills to be a character and tell a story. So that was another difference about our school, was that we taught circus arts, meaning the goal of this is to be able to perform. And that includes thinking about how to be a character, how to tell a story, but it also means that you have freedom. We would get, students who come to us from a yoga background or a dance or a gymnastics background, and they would often have this idea of, I want to do a skill right. How do I do this right? How do I do this skill? And the answer I would always give them, and encourage my teachers to give them, is the only wrong way to do a skill is a way that is unsafe. But as long as it is safe, there is no code of points. There's no circus judge. There's not the Circus Olympics. You're not going to get a gold medal. What tells you if you succeeded is, did the audience enjoy it? And that means, for one character, you want to be long and graceful with pointed toes, with your ballet hands, because you're being a ballet dancer or a character. In another one, you may want flexed feet, splayed toes, awkward elbows, because you're playing a character who is being physically awkward, or that embodies their character better. It's down to the choice of you as the artist. And that's what I think is the beautiful part about circus. That there's not a right answer, a right way. Of course, there's a safe way, but within those bounds, which are very, very wide, you can be whatever you want to be. Of course, you want to impress your audience. You want to learn some cool skills. You want to grow in your own repertoire. But I really tried to emphasize that as a circus school, what we want most of all is for you to learn how to entertain an audience. Tell a story, convey your character. And it was cool because over time we started to gain the population, the students, who responded to that. And that means that, some people they want to do something right. They want to get 10 points on their whatever skill.
On the exam that doesn't exist.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? But we made sure that performance was a regular part of our curriculum. Encourage people to perform. Sometimes that took them out of their comfort zone. But it was great to see that we were starting to build strong performers, be able to put on good shows, satisfy audiences. And of course, when you satisfy the audience, that is the best feedback a performer can get. That's the most
the classic
satisfying thing.
actor go-round witnessed in any show. If you're dealing with somebody and you're ever curious if they are an actual actor, like in their blood, this is what they're born to do, is that if they don't, they should look when they run off stage in one of two ways. Either like they're on top of the world, or like they'd like to shoot themselves. And there's no in between, because the audience, they will, as a professional performer, give the audience what they promised to do, hopefully, assuming nothing else is in awry in their day. The audience then has a choice that you have no control over, but if they feed back correctly with applause, there was one actress on a show that I won't name to spare her. I don't think she'd be embarrassed by this at all, but for any case, there's a magic trick that they had to do in the show, and 9 times out of 10 she performed with 2 boys, and they all 3 did the same trick. She's the first one that did it, and arguably the moment in the beats of the show was cut out in such a way that they should have applauded for her.
Mm-hmm.
They would be confused, and then the audience was like, clap, clap, and she'd come off stage pissed every time. I nailed it, and those bastards just wouldn't clap. And then, of course, on the heels of her saying that, the 2 boys did the trick right behind her, and then the audience explodes, and she was just like, you bastards, you're stealing my limelight. But that's a very normal relationship where the audience may have bought a ticket, but I think the irrational thought in people's heads sometimes with all sorts of performances that the audience is paying the actors. Well, yeah, but the audience, as a good audience member, and a good performer, if you're going to go see a show, you should be empathetic to this, but a good audience member, what they're paying the actors is attention.
Yep.
That's the payment that keeps you suffering through what is usually a miserable schedule if you're in it professionally to make money, a non-community theater schedule. Or a circus arts, I would argue, which is incredibly physically taxing on your body and requires lots of discipline and consistency to provide that kind of safety you need. But that idea that the audience buying a ticket is the payment, it's like, no. You clapping and telling us we didn't fuck it up.
Yep.
That's the getting the A+ on your piece of paper. That's
Although I gotta say, it's one of the most challenging lessons for students to learn is that you are there in your performance, you're trying to entertain the audience, and that means you need to do things like let them know when they should clap. And the MC, of course, helps out with this. my go-to line is always, if you see someone do something that you can't do, you should be clapping. But as a performer, my biggest cue to performers would always be, hold that longer. Because without a pause, a beat, the audience doesn't know that they have permission to clap. They don't want to interrupt you.
They don't want to be rude, right? Overwhelm the moment.
So it's always that, hold everything longer. And the other biggest piece of advice, and the hardest piece for me to even take myself as a performer, is that the audience doesn't know what's hard. You can work your ass off to do a very difficult, demanding trick, and the audience does not care. The audience cares if you are doing the splits. The audience will clap for splits. If you are doing the splits, you will get a round of applause.
Let's get to it, Harley.
And
my lower regions are ripping just thinking about attempting it.
No splits for you?
No, I have the
We'll table it.
flexibility of a stone.
But like Marley's a strongman, you might think, what's your heaviest you can lift. The thickest bar you can bend. The audience doesn't know anything. You have to, in fact, sell them, and lifting something that they know is heavy is much more important than lifting something that weighs a lot.
I think is why I leaned more into the interactive performance of having two audience members get on the swing.
They understand it.
Because they're like, oh, that's two people.
Are heavy.
Exactly. And that
even if you pick two relatively small people.
Yeah. They don't care. They just go, oh, it's people. Holy.
But it's one of the biggest challenges, and that's, it makes circus different from, say, gymnastics. Right? In gymnastics, the harder the thing you do, the more points you get.
Because that's also something that's typically judged in a competition by gymnastics artists.
Yep.
And so that makes sense. Ballet is a lot like that too. There was a show I worked on that their ballet instructor became the head wardrobe guy through a funny chain of events. He had an unfortunate injury, and that it completely fucked his career, which is really sad. But he was super chill about it. But he sat me and a bunch of film grips down who were hired in his crew for this because they needed people, and in the midst of it revealed that he had once had that profession by blowing for us in the CCTV, what was happening and who was doing it well and why they were doing it and all this kind of intricacy you're talking about. But none of that, if he went out to do a blow-by-blow, sort of like a sign language reader standing next to the stage, the audience would have booed him off. Like, get out of here. We don't care about any of that. And there's probably a lot of nuance to what he was saying that only those artists conducting the art would understand. But your audience...
Totally. And like, as a performer, that's always something fun to watch out for. Because we know that you're proud of what you can do and what you worked hard for. And even though the audience doesn't know the difference, you'll see performers doing the harder version of a trick. And you as a fellow performer will at least give them that extra clap because they're doing that for them and for that rare audience member who gives a that they can hold their front lever with their legs straight instead of in a straddle. It's like a clear giveaway. The straddle looks prettier, but the straight leg is harder. And so you can see the 1 foot hang. It's a flex. Like a 2 foot hang, the audience is very, very happy with. A 1 foot hang, you're showing off. And I'll applaud, but everyone else will applaud just the same for the 2 foot hang.
We've noticed that other performers are always our better audience members.
Even different discipline.
Oh yeah.
We did a show entirely for a group of haunters at one haunted house. We worked at Haunted Harvest, which we mentioned before, and they were the best audience of ringers we've ever had. And we were pretty on our stuff. By that point, we were on like performance number 5 at the same venue, same setup, didn't have to think through it. And we were originally just going to give them a little like, okay, well, they're going to let us see their show, so we'll do like a little something. And then by the first performer in, it was everybody looked at me and was like, Now, let's just do the whole show, because this audience is giving us the attention and the actual genuine appreciation, and they performed for people. Also, they didn't understand a lot of what we did, but they were not shy about expressing that they actually enjoyed it, and that what they were seeing was difficult to do.
Oh yeah.
Whereas I've actually had, to your point, that backfire. If a bed of nails is not presented right, there's enough of that sort of thing on the internet. The illusions about that have been ruined, and there are some performers that will do crazy like laying on 3 nails. That's actually dangerous. That might actually kill you. That is legitimately technically hard. A regular bed of nails, I hate to tell our audience, is really easy. It is entirely in the presentation of that trick, and you have to create such a fast illusion of danger, or whatever you do afterwards, the audience is like, cool, man. What else? Because it's just not as flashy, but something really, really dumb that is arguably actually easier, like lighting my arm on fire. Much less effort than bed of nails. People really get excited about that. Relatively undangerous, actually, also.
I think that's also, if you watch a show, especially a traditional circus show or any sideshow style show, that's a lot of the role of the MC, is to tell you why this is amazing. And I remember Ringling Brothers, they would have the ringmaster come up and say, now the aerialists are going to attempt the triple somersault that has only ever been caught by 2 teams in the history of the circus world. They fail 1 out of 5 times. Will they make it today? So they have to tell you, because again, as the audience, you're like, man flies through the air, he flips a bunch, gets caught. That's I assume, every day here. And the same for the sideshow, it's about the danger, right? Like, and it's often the performer, sideshow, you can talk more, you can interact more. That's a lot of the sideshow character, or a street performer. Another great example where the street performer has to tell you the incredibly hard thing they're going to do at the end and build up to it and keep pulling it out from under you.
Essentially, you're flirting with your audience.
Yeah.
That we're going to give you this thing. We're going to give you this thing, but you're going to stay. But if you keep watching, we're going to give it to you. But you and then I'm going to need applause or some money or something. Come on, yeah.
And you got to say how that's so hard or so dangerous, and that feels weird, because of course as a performer, you know what's hard or you know what's dangerous, but you have to tell the audience, because the audience are regular people, and to them you could do anything. Like, you're a circus man, of course. Like, if you could literally walk through the air, like, I'd clap. I might give you $1, but like, you're a circus man, of course you can walk through the air.
I'm not surprised.
Like, that's
You
what I'm
don't know
here
the
for.
extent of the ability.
Oh, that's too funny.
I think we need to invest in those, from, I think it was Shrek 2 at the wedding, the cards. Laugh.
It's actually on the
Cheer.
list. I found some original
Applaud.
ones the other day that were from the 1920s that are like audience cue cards in really
Awesome.
cool blocked font. And so I would like to recreate some of those, because there's an element of comedy for anybody that knows it's a thing that was done. But also, it is actually it's helping the audience. Like, it's giving them, because to be
Here's your
fair,
beat.
if you don't give them the beat, you are disservicing your audience to some degree, because I find that the majority of people do not wish to be rude, and if you don't tell them how to interact in this weird environment that they're getting a drop, just a moment of, they're not going to know how. I mean, I think a modern theater audience, from the many I've seen recently, is confused. And I've noticed that if you look at old Broadway shows, I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. Okay, let's forego that for now. Like old Broadway, where they're talking like this the whole time. Those shows were written, the music has those beats, like very intentionally in the music, or you'll get like a hi-hat hit. And you're like, oh, it's a joke. Okay, everybody laugh. And those things are programmed in. Modern shows get so like Art Nouveau about their sometimes that even though they're really compelling pieces of theater, they forget about that relationship with the audience, and I think it has confused them. And to the point about the show that I mentioned earlier, I don't think the performer did the trick badly at all, and I think she was right to be pissed. But also, the audience something, it's happening the same way every night.
Yep.
Something about that performance is not communicating to your audience. It wasn't an audience of people that would never clap. Or if through 14 or whatever shows I saw, they would applaud for other things. So sometimes your crowd is flat. That does happen. But if you're not giving them permission, like, hey, it's okay. Tell us you love it. And I think that's where circus does shine, circus and sideshow both, because you can tell people.
Oh, yes.
We have a story, but it's not so tight that I can't completely break the fourth wall and go, applaud, or I'm slashing your tires, which is something I've said before. They laugh nervously and then they start clapping.
Yep.
So, but you can still tell them and make it easy to understand. Because I think the other worst awkward thing for an audience is you go to a place and you don't know what you're supposed to do. Haunted houses suck at that. They do not articulate well. There is like theater, everybody understands, sit quietly in there, and you probably clap if we tell you when at some point. But that's a weird environment that people, they're just uncomfortable the whole time, but then you've like distracted them from your performance worse by them feeling some sort of primordial rage from a performer that's trying to get your attention, but you never went, hey, it's okay. You can interrupt what I'm doing. Like, that's tough. That's hard.
It's, like I say, that audience management, I think, is an important thing to be conscious of. And good shows do this really well. And something, again, like the street performance is 100% on the performer to manage the audience. If you're doing a sideshow, it can be the performer, it can be the MC. A circus, that's often nowadays the ringmaster's whole job is to set you up and tell you what to do.
Becomes the narrator to some degree. Right.
Weirdly, in a Cirque du Soleil show, you'll not get those cues. You'll maybe find the more confused audience, and they'll be more likely to clap at the end of each act because they don't get cues inside the act because they're circus trying to more tell a story and not break you out of that. So they don't want you to applaud in the middle for almost any of their acts. There are exceptions, but the clowns will usually have a different pattern. But most of the skill acts, if you've got a romantic duo doing a flying straps act, there's not as many applaud beats because they're more concentrating on like a continuous flow. They're not creating that space.
It's not do a trick, get the applause, do a bigger trick, get a bigger applause, do the trick, and then get the applause. It's a that makes sense. I mean, that's the typical beats that you find in a modern theater show.
Yep.
Where it's okay, that is when the audience, I will say, will clap. Even a modern audience in a show with poor cueing is at the end of the number. Like if there's an obvious point where the stage goes dark, like opera.
Yep.
That's the other thing too, is like with things like opera, the curtain comes down between every single moment in the show. So then you have an obvious indicator, oh, the curtain's down, I should applaud now while they do the change. And so that's an interesting note. But still, in the positive for circus and sideshow, you don't have to write the music for that. You can just tell them. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned in one of our many conversations kind of the key skill for performers. So if you are a performer that's listening, this is a really good moment for you to step a little bit closer. This man is very humble, but has a lot to share in this regard. You had talked about hat skills being this super important, like almost more important to some degree than what you're actually doing.
Well, that being able to, again, build to something that is the climax of your performance, right? You're telling a story, and a story should have a rising action, a climax, and a denouement. Like that's like a narrative structure that we all respond to as humans. Building up to that climax, again, it depends on what your interaction mode is with your audience. In the clearest and most naked way, that is the street performance, where you are telling the audience what the climax is from the beginning of the show. And you are teasing it and building up step by step towards that climax so that you can withhold it, get everybody's money, and then give them the payoff. Of course, in a stage performance, you need to do that just through your narrative, just through your storytelling. You need to be able to show that you are building rising action. This can be through just you're increasing the impressiveness, not the difficulty, but the impressiveness of your skills.
The apparent difficulty to the audience.
But you could take a different approach, and especially in a group act or a partner act, you can, instead of telling this with increasing impressiveness of skills, you tell it with an actual narrative arc. That's the relationship between the members of the group or the pair. And I think that's why I like partner acts the best. I think you have the most space for storytelling, and it's much easier to tell a story with two people than with one person. One person, it requires more skill, and I feel you have a more limited palette. But as soon as you have another person, you can play off each other. You can be friends. You can be enemies. You can fight and make up. You can be lovers. You can be murdering each other. It's just so many rich possibilities for that storytelling and for building that same narrative tension up to a climax. But there you can do it with the story instead of just with the skills or the
grandeur of the performance.
Right. So I enjoy that a lot. Of course, the burlesque world has a very different approach where the climax is when you are the most naked. And after that, you have nothing else to do. And so your act has to finish at the point of maximum nudity. Like that's right. Seriously, like that in a burlesque show, that's the arc. Is you're building up, and the climax that you're teasing is you're going to see my whatevers. You know what you got.
I think that's how I'm now going to refer to them as my whatevers.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like
what I feel like putting on that day.
But that's all these acts will have that structure. Clowning is weird because clowning, instead of building up to a climax of success, clowning almost always builds up to a climax of failure. And because clowns are all about subverting expectations, and in the circus, normally what you expect is skill and success from the performers.
So you want haphazard, sometimes really, really, really grandiose failure out of your clown.
Yep. There's a great clown act in Cirque du Soleil show Kidam, where the clown comes out and he's got like basically a lawn dart. He's got a big target on his head. And he's aiming, he's trying, throws it high in the air. It comes down into his shoulder. Which, of course, he's got a shoulder pad, but it is hilarious because he sets it up, he sells it, he's serious, he's locked in. And of course, what he's doing is just as hard a skill as throwing it to the target on his head.
But because the shoulder is a relatively small target to land a lawn dart on predictably.
But it's funny because he's failed. He's told you what he's trying to do, and he fails. And he sells it. It's great.
The same format, though. He's telling you what the climax is going to be, but in this case, the goal is to screw it up.
Exactly. And that's like almost every... If you look at a clown act with that lens, you can see it's the clown is failing in romance. The clown is failing in friendship. The clown is failing to overcome some obstacle. Like that's the clown is failing to perform a skill. Like those are the most funny and compelling clown acts are all where the clown is very effectively selling the buildup, and then the failure is the climax, and that's what makes you laugh.
maybe I think it's easy to say that for most people, and having stepped in all sorts of worlds related to that, where I've seen lots of different clowns, to include something that's on the rise, this clown fetish thing we were talking about before the show. We won't dive into that any further, but do or don't look that up at your own risk. The idea that like clowns in their head, despite the fact that I find that they are hardly the meat and potatoes of a circus act. Like that to me, human athleticism, now that we've removed the animals aspect of it for the by and large, is the meat and potatoes of circus. Is like people doing really incredible athletic things. And so I think part of maybe the reason that clowns are what's associated isn't simply their appearance is easy to mimic, because it's very caricatured and simply colored, but is that they're almost the easiest to relate to. They kind of break that mold you're talking about earlier, where they're like, you're a circus artist, you could do anything. You're a clown. What's most miraculous is how many of you fit in a car, okay? But I can relate to you because you're screwing up so tremendously, and that's all of our lives.
Not only can you relate to the clown, you can feel superior to the clown. And I mean, I think maybe your interpretation is more generous view of human nature.
I like to think that I have a generous view, but
yeah, I think a lot of what you enjoy about the clown is that that's somebody worse off than me. Like, think about the traditional clown getup is the getup of someone who is not just unfit, but they're also poor and they're ugly. Like they're
badly dressed.
Yeah, they're wearing shoes with holes in them. Their pants are too big. Their jacket is too small. Like,
we're just completely roasting the clowns now.
Well, no, but like that's what a clown is, right? Like I mean, if the clown was suave and cool and successful at everything, they wouldn't be a clown.
No, they'd be the Joker, right? Like it's not. But that is an interesting point too. I like clown acts in an easy, repetitious sense. If you're drawing a generic circus show, for me, is bringing the clown on, and I've actually seen this done. There's a really great show called The Vampire Circus. I don't know if have you seen them perform. They perform at this big convention or trade show called Trans World every year. They're hired in by the haunted house poobahs and all these people. They're like, the haunt industry is the latest and greatest. When it's side by side between you. Yep. So their MC was a Cirque du Soleil clown, their ringmaster character. And he comes out with this decrepit, up-looking foam nose and his long hair. And he's still kind of funny. He's got a pot belly. He's wearing the jacket. He's got vampire teeth. There's a lot going on. He still commanded the stage and told people what was going to happen. But in between every act, so you'd have a nuanced, like, I love roller skating in circus. I think it's one of those tremendous things because it is just relatable enough that you know the bedrock of the feeling.
Yep.
To be thrilled by it. And this tremendous act comes on, and then he shows up. And what they did is they trained their audience with his theme music to the point that by the end of the 2-hour show, I was grinning ear to ear as soon as I heard the music.
Awesome.
As he walks back on stage and does something else ludicrous or stupid or has a stupid problem, or his dim-witted assistant was continually bungling him. But that repetition where he would come on and his clowning would be vaguely related, usually, to whatever the circus professionals had just done. You know, dude comes out with a bow and arrow and does some really cool, amazing tricks and shoots the arrows around his gal up against the target, whatever. And the clown comes out and just royally it. And he's swinging the bow and arrow towards the audience, blindfolded, like that kind of thing. I think is a cool format that allows a clown to have the consistent presence through. But the clown as the MC was interesting to me. I think circus done that for a couple of years also.
Yeah, where the clown is kind of the main character.
You follow.
They're taking a journey, right? But again, I think that's the great example of where the clown is failing, where everyone else succeeded, and that's what's funny, right? They're messing it up. Also, they're ugly and fat and stupid. Everybody loves that.
Everybody wants to feel a superiority. It's interesting. I guess it also gives rise in a way I hadn't really thought this much about clowns before this moment. I'm going to level with you, which is ironic because the majority of the Twisted Whisker Sideshow's company is some degree of clown face paint.
Yep.
Because it's easy to transform a whole character's face with that look.
Yeah.
Which ironically, if you look at circus and its makeup, most of all of the performers are wearing that because it is by nature exaggerated due to distance.
Oh yeah.
But they, the idea of the mean clown,
Mm-hmm.
if you're being professionally on by people your entire career, I think that would make a big out of anyone, right?
Yep.
Like that idea of this like white face prima donna clown that I'm going to make a balloon in really, really well. Like it's a real trope, but also the background for how they become that. And maybe the murderous clowns too have a little. People should give them a little more grace, okay? Because everybody's been laughing at them their entire life, and maybe not joyfully or kindly.
Yep.
Maybe it's just mean-spiritedly.
And they're the closest thing we have. Again, like the old European traditions. Like I'm surprised nobody said commedia dell'arte yet.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's something that's like a foreign concept to folks now.
But it's like the idea that the characters are always the same. And that is where our clown representation comes from.
Mm.
And the idea that you would have these stock characters, who's always the arrogant bastard, who's always the bumbler, who's always the low-born but clever, who's the sexy lady, who's the prude lady. Like that, if you have these characters as a type, it does a lot of your work for storytelling. You don't have to establish.
You don't have to explain a whole background and series of motivations like you would in a novel.
Yep.
They understand, which for our listeners who haven't or aren't familiar with Comedy dell'arte, there's a great YouTube video Craft Course Theater does on it, and it lines up for you those kind of tropes, which you would see reflected in most shows.
Yep.
Now, if you look, just like it was like every story is Romeo and Juliet. Okay, that doesn't hold as much water as every story is vaguely relates its way back to these same kind of troupe of characters that can be played by anybody because you don't have to explain, why they shot John Wick's dog. You just understand he's angry.
And I think that, for us, clowns are still, when you see someone in the clown outfit, the clown makeup, that's a clown, it already does a lot of the character work. When you see the aerialist come on stage, like, they've got to establish their character. We don't have a notion of, like, lady on trapeze. You could be a lot of different kinds of lady on trapeze. But once you're a clown, you come with some baggage. You come with some assumptions. And you can violate those assumptions, but you have to be intentional about it because the audience starts from somewhere. And that's something that, for another character, you have to establish. You have to do more work to establish your character.
It's essentially like the cliches we get in movies. We're relying on this predetermined notion of a cliche, and yes, we like to trash talk it a lot, but it is the foundation and building block of a lot of great movies, a lot of great performances, and whatever. So if we stick to those building blocks, it's less legwork in the long run for the entire performance.
I think that the trouble you end up with is that for me as a theater producer, the background assumption I have to make, and I find myself, I fail at this a lot. You have to really step back and not fall in love too hard with whatever you think you're telling the audience, because you have to put all of your plays on the table as, what am I accidentally telling them?
Yep.
That I did not intentionally, like, maybe I think that this clown has polio and actually is 3 steps from throwing himself into the street. But if I don't really indicate that hard, they're, or that's a bad example, but you understand what I'm saying, that if you don't measure up the expectations that you're accidentally telling if you put somebody in a red jacket and a black top hat, you best be prepared unless you give them a compelling reason to understand something else that they're going to presume that this man tames lions.
Exactly.
And that idea in art is really interesting. I mean, to the same point, movies that are successful often follow common tropes because they are entirely dependent on your audience or the majority of people buying tickets to have, and I think you could mash that into it being relatable, but is it really? Or are we told that at a very young age that it's relatable and that the princess always runs away with the prince and everything's fine?
Yep.
because then you can subvert that intentionally to create horror or other things. I think
that's like again, where I think the group, or especially the partner act, it's very easy to establish your relationship to fit a relationship pattern the audience expects very quickly and easily. And that can be true in a comedic sense with like the funny man and the serious man trope, right? Where one person is trying to do it right and the other person is screwing them up. The lovers trope, the people who are fighting. Like, it's very, very easy to show quite quickly what your relationship is with the other character, and then that just saves you work. That lets you get on to your performance instead of having to establish your character.
In a circus, when you're only going to have 5-10 minutes
Yep.
for your spot in the light to express something and make the audience feel something, you have to be really careful about which presumptions you put forward, like
Yep.
I said. Like, and that way you can move on to the impressiveness that carries those presumptions forward to the climax to get them where they need to be, or where you want your audience to be, hopefully applauding or throwing you money, or both.
And like that's hard to do well and takes skill to do with any nuance, which is why you do see a lot of people fall back on I'm hot, I'm jacked, or I'm going to do a bunch of tricks that are not related. There are some jugglers guilty of this. I'm going to come out on the stage, I'm going to juggle 3 balls, then I'm going to juggle 4 balls, then I'm going to juggle 5 balls, then I'm going to juggle 6 balls, and then I'm going to leave. It's like, great.
But to your point, I think that 3 balls to 6 balls, back to back, the audience could objectively and quickly understand that 6 balls is harder than 3. But if you baby step the shit out of that, the audience will get the gist by the 3rd transition. And it doesn't matter if you ended up with 12 at the end. You could rescue it with a good pause for applause. But if that's the whole, like, the audience is not going to appreciate the difference between 5 and 6 balls.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
They lost on them. They're not, they're like, okay, that's great. I've seen one rescue for that at a Christmas circus show, which is just like a weird variety show. It was called Cirque, A Very Magical Christmas.
Yep.
But it had nothing to do with Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah,
which
not
was
at all.
A very clever piece of marketing they pulled there, because even all of us in the theater that had read the typewriter were like, oh, it's a Cirque du Soleil show. And when the guys showed up to put it in, were not French Canadian, we were like, huh?
Yep.
Oh, you guys are... No, we're not Cirque. But they were still tremendous performers. And the juggler they had that day was... I wish I had bothered to take his name. But he was tremendous. His stage presence was great. His pause for applause was great. His variety of tricks were really, really good. And what he leaned on a lot were some of the acrobats in the wings throwing him things as if he hadn't planned it to make it harder. And so, like, the audience understood that, because I think they could relate to things coming to their life that are not planned. Okay, even though he knows it's coming, it's fine. And there were at least 2 catches that he failed that I felt, based upon his skill, it was likely he did on purpose. And I wonder about that, because if you make yourself kind of frail to the audience, is that not more relatable?
I don't know.
Or is the pride of a juggler something you think they want to do that?
Juggling's really hard. Jugglers drop things. Like, it would... I'm not saying it would never happen, but it would be unusual. If you're doing a good juggling routine, like, you're probably going to drop some stuff.
Just by the by.
Oh, yes. It's different from like almost any other circus kind of act where you don't perform at your edge. But for juggling, like, you're always... If you're doing anything interesting, you've got a chance you're going to drop. There's a lot of throws. And it's like, if you play a lot of D&D, like, everybody rolls a 1 sometimes.
Oh, and then
the more dice you roll, the more likely you're going to roll a 1.
And it was crazy amount of stuff that he pulled off. What I was humbled by, and maybe the reason his drop stuck with me more than anything else he did, is, one, I'm not a juggler, so I am functioning as one of the lay people here, just and the applause he got for continuing after the drop was earth-shattering
Yep.
compared to any of the tricks he did, which led me to wonder, like, maybe he did, but also I've met enough jugglers at this point, particularly our in-house one, who they do not like up. That's not something they typically enjoy, and in fact, maybe I could argue they're a little traumatized sometimes by it, but the audience really supported. They were like, he somehow went from professional juggler to, in one quote mistake, the underdog that won.
Yep.
And that to me tells me that he did take the audience on the ride appropriately.
Oh, yeah.
Where the audience, they were understanding that what he's doing is really, really hard. And
that's very, like I said, as long as you set up the difficulty, or it's apparent, the difficulty is apparent. What you're trying to do is a stretch, and this can be the MC telling them, this can be you telling them, or it can be just something that's obviously incredibly difficult for a human to do. Now, chainsaws don't mean, but 9 balls, right? Like, but
6 isn't impressive, but 9 were really cooked.
But I've been in shows, again, like it's usually a smaller show or a more daring troupe, where they will perform much closer to their edge, and they'll fail tricks and they'll just do it again. And it's awesome because you're seeing these, very, very skilled people doing things that are even hard for them. But again, that's something you wouldn't see in a
Ringling show.
Not a big, overly produced show, but a smaller, more independent circus group. You can see some, like I said, I've seen truly amazing things that would never, they're not safe enough, meaning that they're not consistent enough to see in a normal show. And it's just like left my jaw on the floor. Some of the best technical performances I've ever seen. But again, that's the performers doing it 100% for themselves.
There's no guarantee the audience is going to follow you on that ride.
Yep.
That you failed and now you're going to try again and maybe fail a couple more times and still try. I prefer that kind of thing. I think there was an actual Cirque Christmas show that came through that you may have seen it. And I think it's called Cirque Magical Dreams or something. They've all these stupid Christmas shows, variations on the theme.
Yep.
Somebody falls asleep in a bed. Let's do the classic bed magic trick. Oh, where did they hide? And now they woke up in a dream world, and now there's problems to solve. We've got to find the joy of Christmas in a pseudo Santa Claus figure that's not going to be called that.
But look at how easily you can narrate that story.
Right. Oh, I got it.
They don't have to do a lot of work.
They're
on for the ride.
I've actually seen a Halloween variation too.
Yep.
But Universal Studios does a great Halloween fire show. That they hire a troupe that specializes in fire performance.
Yep.
They all have a suspicious amount of hair, which must mean that they're good.
Yep.
But it was this same setup. Dude lays down in a bed. Dude covers himself with a sheet. Girl appears instead, and she's a problem. Dude is trapped in a nightmare scape of his own creating. And I'm like, look at that. Now we're on a journey to solve the problem. I understand. The manufacturer of magical switching beds in America has to be rolling in dough. They're not cheap, and they seem to have sold a lot of them. That being said, in that Christmas Cirque du Soleil show, there's a thing with, and I'm sure everybody's probably seen it if they've been to a Christmas Cirque show. It's not that uncommon. There's a thing with a bunch of acrobats dressed as reindeer, and they have a series of rings that are spinning on a motor that are magnetically attached to each other. So the performer crashes into them, they fall, but if they go through them, and I don't know, it was like, my memory wants to tell you it's 6 rings tall. Yeah. I don't know that it actually was, but the reindeer at the end, it up. He missed it. And that's such a strong word to apply because...
But accurate.
Right, probably to the performer, but you've already jumped through 5 rings. I think you're allowed at that point to be like, you did a good job, come on, here's a beer. But they then stopped. You could hear the music audibly loop because unfortunately one of the major deaths of circus is the death of the live band accompanying it, which is really a shame. But now you've got me on my clown horn thing rant, sorry. But he got back up and he did it again, failed again, and then got back up again. And at this point, from the wings where I was, you could see the other performers go get it, come on! And the celebratory cheer from off stage was so loud you could barely hear the audience. Because by that point, it probably became a personal axe to grind.
Yep.
Like the second time you retry it, okay, but by the third time,
Mm-hmm.
what are you gonna do? Give up?
Yep.
The audience is watching you. Like you can't. Like you're forced to commit. But that was a really cool moment to get to share with them because that was everything for that one moment to that performer. Like I'm gonna get that 6 ring.
Totally.
And that was cool. That
I
was
think
tremendous.
one thing that I've noticed is underutilized a lot in performance is the ability to be underestimated.
Yeah.
When haunting, one of my favorite things was to move slowly behind the trailer so people think that I can't keep up with it.
Yep.
Therefore, giving the illusion and allowing them to underestimate me, and then I strike.
Yep.
And I sprint and hit the trailer, and they freak out because this wasn't meant to happen.
Yep.
This person was supposed to fail, and he didn't. He scared the hell out of me. And so there's a level of, like, knowing your ability, slightly underselling it, so that you can drive the story forward by then exceeding all expectations set upon that moment.
It's like you're an anti-clown.
Exactly.
I feel like you sell the failure, then you violate that expectation with success.
Exactly.
The same thing with violating the Romeo and Juliet. Well, although actually, ironically,
They all live.
Right. Yeah. And you're like, wait a minute, this is wrong. But horror is about subverting those expectations. So the idea that they make it out alive, and then we're gonna show you how wrong you were, is the elements of plots of things like Hostel, very unfeel-good movies. So it does bear that the opposite would ring true for success and joy. I know that we are considerably over time at this point.
Well, it's been lovely, gentlemen, and I think that just means we need to do a follow-up session.
I think so. Before we
agree.
One more thing I wanted to lay at your feet was you had mentioned your retirement, which is very, very exciting. And I know that you are the kind of person that will find so many things to get involved with and to fill up your time very quickly. As you mentioned when you came in, you're like, I feel like I'm already busier than I was when I had work.
Yep.
What, if you had to pick a thing or a couple of things to pontificate about that you are really excited for this next chapter in your life that you're going to get to do? What is it?
Well, I mean, I'll be back at the Viking experience as half of the Nimble Norsemen, and so I'm very excited about getting that out.
And that's together. You and your wife, Melanie?
Yep, exactly. So we'll be there, and then I'm excited about starting to teach circus arts again, trying to find a venue where I can do that, start on a small scale, but get my teaching business going again. And I'm excited about performing, and as I said, I'm a partner performer, so that means hunting for a partner and figuring out what kind of stories we want to tell and where we can tell them.
Is there a world where we might be able to expect that you may be performing with the sideshow on occasion?
I would love to perform with the sideshow.
We're really, really excited to bring kind of that corner into things. We've never done any aerialist stuff. Of course, unfortunately, this is pushing it slightly out of the dark grungy into the nicer, more well thought of performance styles. So
you just got to start doing
swallow that
over nails.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Oh, swallow that pill. But at any rate, thank you for being here with us. It's been a great time, great conversation.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I hope that there's some young artists out there that are listening that might have been inspired by some of the things Kerry had to share with us. Because that's ultimately at the back end of this, is to encourage people to go do more art, get off your damn phone, go do something. And as I think you said, the key kind of takeaway is that there's no failure in trying. There's only failure in breaking your neck.
Exactly.
Right? Anything short. So with that, thanks for listening, y'all.
Go ahead and follow us on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram. And also, go and check out Nimble Norseman. You're on Instagram. I will link them in the social media posts and everything that I can. And go and drop a like and a follow on whatever platform you're using to listen to us right now. We really appreciate it. Share some art with us. If you're practicing a new trick, send us a video of you working through it or nailing it. Send us something you're proud of. We'd love to see how you're going.
All right, y'all. Well, I think that's it for us. Thanks for coming. And
Thanks
ciao.
for having me. Bye, y'all.
Ciao.